Hello, welcome to our very first Study in Sweden Google Hangout. I think we will wait a few minutes to get started until everybody has time to join. And while we're waiting, we'll introduce ourselves. My name is Rachel Weiner. I work at the Swedish Institute here in Stockholm, where we are sitting today, with Marketing Sweden as a study destination. If you have written to us on Facebook at the Study in Sweden page, I might have responded to your comment. I also work with our website, studyinsweden.se, and a whole bunch of other fun Study in Sweden projects. And to my left is the lovely Marlene.
Hello, my name is Marlene Whiteley, and I work at an agency called the Swedish Council for Higher Education, but you know us better as University Admissions in Sweden, and that's mostly what I work with, especially with the website universityadmissions.se. So that's why I'm here today, help answer your questions.
Great, thank you so much for joining us, Marlene. So to start out, we are going to go through your next steps. Probably you're here with us today because you received an offer of admission and you're wondering, what do I do? So Marlene is going to walk you through how to accept your offer and move forward.
Yeah, and I know the process seems a little bit complicated here in Sweden, especially as soon as students get their notification of selection results. There's a lot of questions about, you know, what should I do now? And I had to rank my choices, and maybe I've gotten accepted to certain choices that I had, and maybe I've been put on reserve for some. So this is sort of a little bit of information about what you should do next. The most important thing you need to do is reply to your admissions offer. And that's, if you leave our hangout today with any information that's important, make sure that you answer your notification of selection results. And you can do that right on your account on universityadmissions.se when you log in. And what you're going to find is that under applications, you have a list of the different programs or courses you've applied to, and information about which ones you've maybe been admitted to or you've been placed on reserve for. Most students who apply to Sweden apply for master's programs, so I'm going to focus more on that, I think, but bachelor's programs pretty much work the same way. And what happens is you're allowed to apply for up to 4 master's programs, and a lot of people actually do apply for all 4. And when we did the admission process, we looked at your first choice first. And that's the first thing that we do, of course, and look at it and say, okay, is this student eligible to have a place in this or be admitted to this program? And if the answer is yes, then you're admitted and that's the end, and your other choices are deleted, and all great. And if you really want to come to Sweden and want to do that course, make sure you check the box that says yes and submit it, which is pretty much that easy. What can happen for some students is that they find that they're placed on reserve for maybe their first choice, or maybe reserved for their first and second choice, and they see that they've been accepted to a choice that's further down. What's really happened is that the first choice, they say, okay, well, you're definitely qualified and we like you, but we have some students that have a little bit better grades, and so they've been offered a place before you. But if they decide not to take that place, you're on our waiting list. And what you really need to do is look and say, well, is this reserve place one that I like even better? If it is, make sure you check yes to that. If you don't care about the course that you've been accepted to, you can ignore that. But my suggestion to everybody is, and our suggestion is, make sure you check yes to the reserve and to the one that you've been admitted to, because if you don't get into the one that you're on the waiting list for, you can still have your program that you've been accepted to. And that's probably the biggest question that we've had right now from applicants is, what do I do if I have reserve or an admitted? So I hope that helps. I was also thinking maybe we could talk about conditionally admitted. Yeah, because there's a lot of people that see a conditionally admitted status, and that can mean 2 different things. For some students, for example, you could have a student in their last year of bachelor studies. They still have to submit some documents to their school. So they're admitted on condition that they turn in these documents. There could be some other things that the university is still waiting for from you. Make sure you look in your account on University Admissions. You'll have a message about that. But for a lot of students, the reason that they're conditionally admitted, and this confuses people, and I can tell you a little secret, I've been trying to get this little bit changed, as you guys know. You're also considered conditionally admitted if you have to pay tuition fees, because until you've paid the tuition fees, you're not actually officially admitted here in Sweden. So don't worry, and don't be concerned about what's the condition. If you decide that you want to study in Sweden and you answer yes to your notification and you pay your tuition fees, you're not conditionally admitted anymore. So that's another big question that we get as well.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you, Marlene.
You're welcome.
Well, great. So we've also had quite a few other frequently asked questions, which we're going to go through now, after which we will take your questions, which we're very happy to see are dropping in through the Google Hangouts app. So if you do have questions, please type them in English, and we'll be happy to answer them after we go through our FAQ.
One of the things that I can say is if you have specific questions about your specific application, we can't answer them on here. The best thing for you to do is call University Admissions or send them an email through the contact form, because we really can't discuss specific admissions applications here. It would be a problem with privacy, so we won't do that. But please contact University Admissions. There's chat now too, so chat them up.
Exactly. Thanks for clarifying that, Marlene. So our first FAQ is, what happens if I have a question about how my application was evaluated, that University Admissions is giving me a message that I don't agree with, and I'm not sure what to do? Should I contact University Admissions, or should I contact my university or my program?
I think that the best thing to do when you're unsure of if it says that you're not qualified, or even if you haven't been offered a place and you're thinking, well, my grades were fantastic and I'm not really sure what's happened here, contact University Admissions first, because there may be something in your admissions application they can see online that will tell them immediately what the situation is. That sometimes people aren't aware that they're considered unqualified because their English score was not high enough and they didn't realize that. There can be a lot of different reasons. If University Admissions can answer, they will definitely direct you to the university with your questions. But I think I'd start out there first, just to find out if they can answer your question a little bit more quickly for you.
Great. And is there anything that you would recommend students to contact their universities about first, that they should definitely ask them about?
Yeah, that's always a tough question, and sometimes it depends a little bit on the university. Some universities are, very eager to have students contact them directly, and others want to go through University Admissions first. Yeah, if it's a really specific question about your program, for example, University Admissions won't be able to answer that. If you have a question about, I applied for this engineering program and one of the qualifications is this, and I think I have it, but it looks like I don't, you probably should get in touch with the program coordinator who can answer that better for you.
Okay, Great, thanks. And another question that we get quite a lot is, what should I do if I'm not sure I can actually come to Sweden? If for whatever reason you just haven't made up your mind 100%, or you might not know if you have funding, should I still accept my offer? What happens next?
What I would say is, we have a process here where everyone gets their first admissions or result or notification of selection results. And that you have to definitely reply to. And I forgot to mention, just because I think that everyone should be reminded from my notes, the bachelor's last date to reply is 2nd of April and master's is the 13th of April. But then what happens is, based on how everyone has replied, the universities and University Admissions will look again at, okay, well, we have 30 places in this program and there are 20 people who've said yes to their offer. Now we have 10 more places. So they take the reserves and they decide there. Your second notification of selection results is going to come out after that. But now I think if you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm not really sure what I should do, answer yes on your answer yes for sure, because you can always later on tell your university that you don't want to have your place. There's a whole process that goes on after even the second notification with people who've applied late, people who contact the university later and say, okay, well, I said no, but now I mean yes again. And there's a lot of things that happen outside completely of University Admissions, just to make sure that all students' applications are looked at and everyone's given a chance for the places available. So answer yes. But when the day comes that you say to yourself, okay, well, now I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to come to Sweden, it's a kindness to let your university know, so that if someone is waiting for a place, that they'll be able to offer that to somebody else.
Great. Thanks, Marlene, for that really informative reply. I think we'll hop over to the audience questions now. So once again, if you do have questions, please feel very free to add them Our first question is from Marco, who wants to know, he says, it says that I have to fulfill all the special requirements before the roll call. What is a roll call?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I think that's the thing that's a little bit unique to Sweden, isn't it? And you guys have actually been through this probably. And the roll call is the first day that you go to classes. I know I come from the US, and a lot of the registration happens before you get to campus. But what you have to do in Sweden is actually show up for the first day, the day of roll call, and they'll see who's there and who isn't there, and decide whether, well, it's really making a decision about whether you're going to continue and study or not. I'm not sure if students miss that with the roll call, but I know that they wonder what that is. So yeah, it would be a good idea to be there. And I have to fulfill all the special requirements before the roll call. Yeah, conditionally admitted. I think this was a little bit what I was talking about earlier. And if you have questions, you should definitely contact the university that you've applied to. But if you have certain requirements they're waiting for you to submit, that just means that before you show up to campus, you should make sure you get them to them, so you'll be officially admitted.
Perfect. Andreas asks us if there's any advantage to coming earlier to Sweden and having his father who lives in Sweden help him with a personal number. This isn't necessarily related to accepting your offer, but I think we can briefly touch on it. The application process for a personal number is also something that we've been getting a lot of questions about on Facebook, and also I saw on the landing page for this chat. Getting a personal number requires that you fulfill the requirements that the Swedish tax agency has set up for that, which usually means that you need to be able to prove that you'll be living in Sweden for at least 1 year before you can register. If you're going to be here for less than a year, you're usually not able to. If your father is a Swedish citizen, you might, depending on, I want to say, your age, be able to apply for a personal number regardless based on your family connections. But what I would do is contact the Swedish tax agency. They're easy to search for. If you just search on Google for the Swedish tax agency, you'll find their website. And there you can find their information about who can register for a Swedish personal number and how. In terms of your studies, I wouldn't necessarily say that there's an advantage to coming extremely early, but of course it's always good to get here before the term starts so that you can get settled, get oriented, and find your way around, and so on. Marlene, do you have anything to add?
No, and I was actually thinking that there was one thing that I didn't mention that is another very common question that we get, and I was actually talking to some of my colleagues back at University Admissions about this and thought that I would mention it, and it's about reapplying for courses and programs. And for some students, they've been deemed unqualified for certain reasons, but since then, they've gotten the qualifications they need and they are qualified for the course. And what you can do is have a late application. And for a lot of courses and programs, students have a good chance of getting in if they have submitted a late application. And there's, unfortunately, the reapplication process is a little bit of a complicated one. I even have my cheat notes here from University Admissions, but you can always go on University Admissions and read. But I'm just going to read here what it says. If you wish to reapply to courses you were previously unqualified for, but now are because of additional documentation, please follow these instructions. And you need to submit your new documentation to University Admissions along with a letter explaining that you would like to reapply. So that's really important that you get the letter in as well. And you need to include the application code for the courses you wish to reapply to. And you need to rank them. So if there's 2 or 3 programs, okay, I want to reapply for these and I'm interested in them, make sure you put them in the right order. Very important. Application codes, a lot of people actually ask us about that. But if someone goes into the system and puts in your application code, they'll see everything about you and that you've applied for that program. So it's important information. So that's a little bit of information. I think University Admissions, you can take a look, and if you have questions about reapplying, be sure to contact University Admissions through chat, or you can also send in through the contact form, because I know a lot of students have been getting in touch with us and saying, okay, I didn't make the deadline in the first place. Is it too late? In many cases, it's not too late.
Perfect. So Raymison is asking us, when a student is conditionally admitted, he can't answer his offer until the tuition fee is paid. Is that correct? I've been conditionally admitted and can't find a way to answer.
That's really strange, because you should be able to go into your account on University Admissions, and you should be able to reply to your offer even if you are conditionally admitted. What I'm going to suggest you do for sure is contact University Admissions. I think this is a question you can probably be able to answer through chat. We don't like to answer specific questions about eligibility and things like that through chat, because it takes too long. But if you just contact them and say, okay, I've been trying to answer yes to my offer and I can't do it, can you help me? That's a really good question to call or get in touch with University Admissions and ask. Because it sounds like there might be a little bit of a glitch there. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I hope it helps.
Perfect. Claudia asks, good morning. I'm on reserve and my waiting list number is 4 out of 14 in the EU students list. If some places become available on the other list for paying students, then will these places become available for non-paying reserve students? Yeah,
that's a very impossible question for us to answer, because the different universities have different rules for how they accept students. I think in this case, probably the best thing you can do is contact the program coordinator and say, this is my situation. But they don't really like to answer questions about reserve here in Sweden too much, because it's very, very hard to say what your chances are. I mean, 4 out of 14 sounds really good, but if every single person that's been offered a place in your program says yes to it, then it's 4 or 1, it doesn't make a difference. It's all the same. So there's a lot of reluctancy to answer questions about reserve, because you never know. You could have place 20 out of 40 and there's 30 places in the course and nobody answers yes. That sounds really strange. It probably wouldn't happen, but you really never know. So you can contact the program. I guess it's usually a professor who's a program coordinator, right? And just find out if they can help you out, especially with this whole EU students list and paying students list. That I'm not really sure about how to answer. So ask them.
Perfect. We can also answer another question quickly. Marco asks us, what's the best way to find accommodation in Växjö? And I hope you practice pronouncing Växjö before you come to Sweden.
That's your assignment for today. Växjö.
How can I reserve a place on campus? These kinds of questions are very specific to, of course, the city that you'll be living in this case, Växjö. But of course, we also get them about Stockholm, Uppsala, Lund, Malmö, Gothenburg, Umeå, everywhere. And the only person who can answer this question is someone who's already living in Växjö. So no matter where you're studying, if you have questions about accommodation, my number 1 advice is to contact your university first. They will almost without exception have some kind of information available about how to find housing. In many cases, they may be able to either provide you with housing or at least help you get on a waiting list. And if not, they'll at the very least have a guide for the websites and places to look in your specific city. In some cities, it's more difficult than others to find housing, but every university knows what it's like for international students there to find housing. If you're studying in Växjö, I would also very warmly recommend that you check out our student blog, because we have an international student currently blogging from Linnaeus University in Växjö, whose name is Redwan. So if you check out his blog, you can comment to him, and soon you'll actually be able to email him through the blog as well to ask him questions about finding housing, and I'm sure he'll have lots of advice on the best areas and so on. You can find the blog at blogs.studyinsweden.se, or if you're in the Study in Sweden site, it's a section of the website. So that's our advice on housing. Our next question is from, let's see, we have a bunch. Noor has asked us, is getting a student visa from the Swedish embassy where I live complicated? This, of course, depends entirely on where you live and the embassy. But generally speaking, getting a visa and a residence permit for studies is a pretty straightforward process. You need to be accepted by your university, so you need to actually have your offer, which you hopefully have at this point. You need to have paid your first tuition fee installment if you're from a country where students are required to pay fees. And then you need to meet a couple of other requirements. For instance, you need to be able to prove that you can finance yourself during your period of study. And rather than summarizing them and giving you wrong information accidentally, I would instead suggest going to the migration agency's website, where they have all of the guidelines. But basically, if you follow the guidelines and turn in your documents as soon as possible, which is another thing we really recommend, you can apply online. If you do all that, it shouldn't be overly complicated for you to apply. And if you have questions, again, contact the Swedish Migration Agency. They've recently changed names from the Swedish Migration Board.
Did they do that?
Yeah, interestingly enough, they
and no one told me. Crazy.
You're finding out. We're all finding out together now. If you go to their website or to your embassy's website, which you can find through swedenabroad.com, you can find all the details, and you can also find contact details for your embassy.
I can add a thing here very quickly. I met with some colleagues at the Sweden Migration Agency not too long ago, and what they're trying to do is encourage students to apply online. The process goes much more quickly when you apply online, so definitely start there, because they were telling us that when you go to the embassy, it can take a little bit longer. So that's, I shouldn't be saying incorrectly since they told me to say that, but
I agree.
online.
I think I was also, we were at the same
We
meeting.
were at the same meeting. See, she remembers.
And yes, definitely apply online unless you absolutely can't. But try your hardest to apply online. Let's see. Avilash asks when the scholarship results will be declared. I assume you are referring to the Swedish Institute scholarships. The Swedish Institute scholarship results will, I believe, be announced on or around April 10th. So good luck. And if you have questions about your Swedish Institute scholarship application, I recommend joining their Facebook group. They have a page called Swedish Institute Scholarships for Studies and Research, and they will be happy to answer your questions there. Nikos, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, asks, what should be the first thing to do when we arrive in Sweden concerning our admission? What documents should we definitely carry?
From what I understand, there are some original documents that you need to present to the university when you arrive, but that's something that you definitely need to contact your university about. As far as university admissions is concerned and your online process, there isn't anything more you need to do with us. You just need to come here, but definitely get in touch with your university after you've accepted your offer and you're coming here, and just double check with them. You can look at messages they've sent you that you may have already gotten the information, and they'll let you know what you need to have with you. A passport is obviously something that everybody needs, but some universities do ask for students, especially students who have uploaded documents, to bring originals with them. But that does not mean that I'm saying that everybody needs to bring those documents. Check and find out what your university and your program wants you to bring, so you have the right things with you when you get here. I'm also trying to think if there's any kind of documents that a student should have other than passport in particular. I don't know.
In some cases, it seems that your question, you may be an EU citizen based off of your name, which seems Greek. If you're an EU citizen, it would obviously be different because you don't even need a passport to travel around the European Union. If you're not, I believe that in many cases you need to bring proof of insurance, but this might not apply for everyone. So I completely agree with Marlene. Your university will let you know once you've been accepted what you need to bring with you, both into the country and to the first day of class. Yeah. Earlier we were talking about roll calls, and sometimes to the roll call you might need to bring your notification of selection results or something along those lines. So once you've been accepted and you've accepted your offer, your university will become sort of your first point of contact. And they're always really happy to help you if you have questions.
Yep.
Let's see. We've got a bunch of questions now. I think we can skip that one.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good. And we have two questions about working in Sweden. Oops, another one popped in. So Noor asks us, and we had another question about working as well, what is the possibility of working while you're studying a master's degree? This particular person has experience in electrical engineering. As an international student in Sweden, there are no rules telling you how much you're allowed to work. You can work as much as you want, in theory. However, studying is a full-time job, and a lot of international students in Sweden find that although, depending on the program, you might not have a lot of classroom hours, you need to put in a lot of work outside of the classroom doing independent studies, reading, working on essays, and doing group projects, and so on. That being said, a lot of students do have part-time jobs, and it's a great way to get your foot in the door for a career if you're planning to stay in Sweden and work, or in general, a career in your home country or anywhere else. Having work experience is obviously a plus. I think this it helps if you're living in a city where the industry that you're interested in has a strong presence, if you want to work within your industry. If you want to have a part-time job in a restaurant or in a cafe or so on, those exist everywhere. But so it can be a challenge to find part-time work if you don't speak any Swedish. Again, this can also be a little bit different in bigger cities where you might find part-time work at an international company that has English as a working language. But I would say the key thing is to be persistent and perseverant, to use all of your contacts, and to definitely make your university career center your starting point. Someone else had asked in relation to having a personal number, if you need a personal number to work. And the answer is no, you do not need a personal number to work, but you might need a in Swedish, it's called a samordningsnummer, in English, a coordination number, which is basically how you register for taxes. Some companies might ask you for a personal number, but usually you can use your samordningsnummer or your coordination number. And if you have questions about this, either your University Career Center or absolutely the Swedish Tax Agency can help you once you're here in Sweden. Marlene, would you like to add anything?
Don't think so. I think that was good. Good
Okay.
answer.
Perfect. Let's see who is next. We have a question about the Visby scholarship, which I'll read. Hope this question is relevant to the chat. I have applied for the Visby scholarship program. Is there a quota set? What is the number of students whose candidacies are being considered? Unfortunately, we are not able to answer questions about Swedish Institute scholarships, which is why I wanted to mention this, because I know maybe a lot of you guys have applied for SI scholarships and are wondering. The Study in Sweden team is a separate team from the scholarship selection team and committee. So unfortunately, we don't know. If you, earlier in the chat, I mentioned you can go to their Facebook page and ask questions. You can also write them an email through our website. But aside from that, unfortunately, we who are here today are not able to answer questions about the Visby scholarship or any other Swedish Institute scholarships. But thanks for your question, David. We have a question about Science Without Borders, which I think we can answer. About being conditionally qualified. And this is from Ray Misson, who had previously asked us about accepting a conditional.
Oh, was this where I answered and said that you should contact to find out why you can't answer yes? Yeah. And I would imagine that you probably had a lot of contact from someone whose name is Bengt. He's our coordinator for Science Without Borders. I almost, to be honest with you, think that you should pop Bengt an email and ask him your question. Yeah, no, definitely. I'm not 100% sure if you're supposed to answer your offer online or not, but Bengt can, his name is Bengt Levinson. Send him an email and he'll be able to answer that for you. No problem at all. That's what I do.
Perfect. Yep. So that's regarding the Science Without Borders program. If you're Brazilian and applied for a Science Without Borders year in Sweden.
And you should all have been contacted by Bengt a few times, so just send him an email.
Exactly. Let's see. And these we have already covered. Here is another question from Abhilash. I have been admitted to a program at Chalmers. What are the chances that my application for a residence permit gets accepted? What happens if it gets rejected? That's a good question. I can imagine a lot of people are wondering the same. Generally speaking, it's not, the decision to grant you a residence permit is based on whether or not you fulfill the requirements. So as long as you fulfill the requirements to get a residence permit, the chances are pretty good that you'll get one. The reason I can imagine that you, theoretically speaking, might not get one would be if you didn't meet the requirements, or if you sent in wrong documentation, or if they were missing something and tried to contact you and you didn't respond, or so on. But generally speaking, it's not competitive to get a residence permit. There are no quotas. You will be able to get one for studies if you have been admitted to a program, and by the way, congratulations on being admitted to Chalmers, and if you meet the other requirements that the migration agency sets out. So I would recommend, again, going to the Swedish Migration Agency's website to find all the details on how to apply, and also contacting your local embassy or consulate if you have more questions.
It is possible, if I'm not mistaken, you might know this better than I, but I think if you have some questions about that process, probably your university would be able to help you as well. Because as soon as you've gotten your notification, you've been admitted, your university, especially international offices and international coordinators, will be glad to help you with questions like this. So if you're feeling a little bit uncertain or are not sure of the process, I would definitely give them a call. I think they would be very helpful.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great advice. And in general, I think we can add that it's always a good idea to contact your program coordinator if you have questions, kind of in general about coming. If you're wondering about a certain element of your program, if you want to get in touch with the current students, if you want to get in touch with alumni, if you're worried about, shopping for food. I mean, they're really happy to help you, and they really want you to come, and they're more than happy to put you in touch with current students as well. So it's always a really good point of contact to just get started. We have another question from Marcelo, who asks, I've been accepted for a program, but I would like to change to another program that was my second choice at the same university. Is that possible?
Yeah, we get this question a lot as well. And I think the whole idea of ranking your choices when you submit your application, and then this whole idea that you can't change your mind maybe later on is very unique for Sweden, and generates a lot of questions, which I understand. What'll happen in that case, I can tell you technically what will happen, and then probably what you should do. Technically, no, you cannot at this point switch over to your second choice. You've been accepted to your first choice, and the second choice has been deleted. But what you can do is reapply for that second choice, especially if you were qualified for it. But what happens is, if you reapply, that's going to be a late application, and so there's not a lot of guarantee that you're going to be offered a place in that second choice, because all the people who had it as their first choice have already been offered places. But since they're both at the same university, I'm going to say that maybe you might want to contact the university, the program coordinator, and ask them this question, because since they know you, and since they know they've already accepted you for the first program that you're interested in, you might be able to have a little bit more. You might be able to get a little bit more information from them, and it's very likely that the answer will be the same. You can apply now as a late application and take your chances, but you also may be able to have more direct contact and find out. So that's what I would do.
Perfect. Thank you, Marlene.
Yep.
Let's see. Anna asks, can I travel within the EU during my studies if I have a Swedish residence permit? If you need a visa to enter Sweden, which some of you may, I have to say I'm not sure what applies to enter other EU countries.
I'm going to guess, but don't quote me on this, that if you have a residence permit in Sweden, because we're part of Schengen and because we're part of the European Union, that I can't imagine that you wouldn't be able to travel in other places in the European Union. But if you really want to make sure, check out the Sweden Migration Agency's website. And if you can't find an answer there, you can always ask the question. But I would find it very strange that you would come to Sweden and wouldn't let you out. Sorry, you can't leave.
Yeah, exactly. I also want to mention regarding the migration agency, if you have questions like this and you're not able to find an answer on their website, but you need an answer, I would strongly recommend calling them. You might have to wait for a long time on the phone, but it is by far the fastest way to get a quick response. So again, if you have questions about residence permits that are sort of general, that aren't related to your country, I would recommend calling the migration board. And you can find their details on their website, which we can show you in a little bit. let's see. We have a question from Darko about doing his PhD in Sweden, which we can also touch on very briefly. We generally get a lot of questions about doing PhDs in Sweden. It's a great place to do your PhD. It is very competitive, and in Sweden, it's very decentralized. So each university and really each department at each university decide what PhD positions that they have available, which means that if you're looking for a PhD program, you would need to look at the university that you're interested in or that department and find out what positions they are offering that year, and also check back regularly, because unlike in other countries where you'll find top PhD programs, in Sweden doing a PhD is very research focused, which means that a certain group might announce a PhD vacancy at a certain point, but not necessarily that they take in 2 students every fall. So I would recommend doing a thorough sort of a run through of the universities with doing research that you're interested in, and then just contact those departments directly to find out if and when they'll be accepting new PhD students. With that being said, Marlene at University Admissions also works with a website called studera.nu, which is spelled studera.nu, studera.nu. At studera.nu, you can find a lot of information in English about doing your PhD in Sweden. So I would warmly recommend visiting that website to find kind of more general information about how the process works. Would you like to add anything, Marlene?
No, I think that's as Rachel says, we do get an awful lot of questions about PhD studies, and because they aren't coordinated the same way that master's studies and bachelor studies are, it's hard for us to answer a lot of questions because it does depend on the university and what they have available and what they're looking for. So it's not very coordinated actually either. So it's more in contacting all the universities to try to get information. But I think it's called Doktorandhandboken in Swedish, and I think it's the doctoral handbook, we call it on that studera.nu. There's a lot of information there actually in English, but it's mostly for students who are actually living here in Sweden. So keep that in mind. But you can get some information from the handbook.
Perfect. We have another question about housing, which we can quickly take. Kiki, or Vasiliki, has asked about accommodation and wants to know if we have any advice. And I would again say check with your university as your first point of contact. They will be able to tell you the process for international students there. Some universities might have guaranteed accommodation for international students. Some might have accommodation that's not guaranteed but that you can apply for. Some might have no offering, but they can tell you where all students in that town apply. And of course, they can also tell you the best places to search for housing in that region. You can also go into studyinsweden.se, our website, and we have a short rundown of the different forms of housing that you can find in Sweden and some basic websites to start with. But again, the absolute first place you should check is with your university, and also with your student union at your university, because they often have some good advice as well.
Maybe take that one too, because it's almost the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We also have another question from Avilash asking about admitted students at Chalmers, and if it's possible to get a list of other admitted students so that you can share accommodation. And that is something that you very likely can get from your university, but you would just need to contact them and ask. It would depend on what kind of information they feel comfortable handing out to others, but at the very least, they can take your address and share it with other students. Of course, there also could be a Facebook group or other social media groups for students on your program. So I definitely recommend searching on Facebook, maybe mainly because it's used all over the world, but you could also use other sites and just check new Chalmers students 2015, 2016 or so on, or whatever your university is for other people listening. And if you don't find a group, you can start one and people will definitely join. And that way you will be able to find other new students who are coming and get in touch and start chatting and share your questions and concerns.
I have to add, on a totally side note, Gothenburg is a very beautiful city. So you're gonna enjoy it there a lot.
Gothenburg is a beautiful city. You can also, we have another blogger from Chalmers, whose name is Jimmy. So if you visit our blog, blogs.studyinSweden.se, you can write to Jimmy in the comments if you have questions about studying at Chalmers.
The blogs are really great to check out. It's nice to hear from students who are actually here. I mean, Rachel and I are good at answering your questions, but to find out what it's like to actually be a student and to be here in Sweden, you can find some great things on the blog. I love to read them.
Thank you. And in case you are interested, we'll be having more hangouts throughout the spring with some of our bloggers. So you will have the chance to chat with them as well if you have direct questions for them. Let's see. What do you think about?
Yeah, that's a tough question, but we probably should tackle it.
Okay. We have a question from Anna. I am an international student. What kind of medical insurance should I have, from Sweden or from my home country?
Yeah, that is, I'll tell you a little project that I've been working on with a group called Forum for Internationalization that's also at my agency. And part of it has been, and this is going to maybe not answer your question at all, but you can understand where we're at with this, has been talking about the different steps for international students and where some questions can be more difficult than others. And I think one of the questions that can be tough is for sure medical insurance. For some students that are residents in the EU, there are certain things that they should do. For students that are not EU residents, there's other things that they should do. Some universities offer student health insurance and medical insurance in this way or in a different way. And I know we keep having this answer to some of our questions, but I would definitely contact the university you're planning on attending. They'll be able to tell you what they have available, and what you need to take with you, because the answer could be different depending on where you're from, and it's a little bit complicated, but the university will be sure to uncomplicate it for you. So be sure, Anna, that you give them a call or send them an email.
Great. Let's see.
I like the question that says that we already answered the question. Those are my favorites.
Those are perfect. We can, I guess, answer, we have a question about the requirements. What are the requirements to be qualified for a master's in economics, from Mir Tasman? And Mir, this would depend on the program. In Sweden, each program sets their own specific entry requirements. There are also general entry requirements that apply for the whole country. So I would recommend, first of all, going into universityadmissions.se and checking out the basic entry requirements, and also searching for a program. And when you find a program there, it will include details on the requirements. And if you're not clear on those after reading it, you can contact the program coordinator, who will be able to clarify any questions that you still have.
Mm-hmm. The general entry requirements for just about every master's program in Sweden is that you have completed a bachelor's degree and that you meet the English requirements. Very important, very, very generally. But then these more special requirements you have to meet depend on the university. And it could be that a university says, well, the general entry requirement for English is that you have to be able to do this much, but we think maybe the requirement should be this much, or maybe it's a little bit less. They can even decide things like that. So my recommendation, and we write this on university admissions as well, is if you find a master's or even a bachelor's program you're interested in, and you want to know what you need, what you need to have, with you, definitely check on the university's website, the program's information, and that will tell you everything you need in order to be qualified for it. Definitely important to do that.
Perfect. So I think, should we, or should we?
Yeah, I think we should answer the ones we can't answer.
We have we have a question from Wojciech about CSN, which is student funding for Swedish residents. And I would suggest that you contact CSN directly with this question. For anyone else listening, this is aimed only at people who are already residents in Sweden. It's not something that's available for generally international students coming from abroad.
No, CSN is Sweden's financial aid program for people that are in Sweden. And in general, you have to have permanent residency to be eligible for CSN. So that's one of the things you need to know. But if you're an international student, you won't qualify for this at all. But this person who's asked the question is actually living here in Sweden. So I can say the thing you need to know is that you have to have permanent residency. But if you're unsure, definitely contact CSN. They'll be able to help you out with that. We don't talk too much about CSN because most of our, or all of our international students, it's not even an option.
Yeah, exactly. And let's see. I think we can take one last question, which can lead us into our conclusion for today. Well, okay, we can take two last questions. Anna has asked us if it's possible to study in Sweden for free. And this is also, maybe not surprisingly, something that to study Swedish. Oh, excuse me.
Okay.
Thank you, Marlene.
You're welcome.
Yes, studying Swedish for free. This depends on your university.
Yeah.
Once again, a lot of universities offer it for free. Some universities offer it for a fee. Depending on if you have received a Swedish personal number, you can also apply for a course called SFI, which stands for Swedish for Immigrants, which is a free course offered by the government.
Which is a course that I've done 17 years ago.
Wow.
Have you done that as well?
I have not done SFI, actually.
Oh, it's fun. No, it is a good course. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but SFI is a great way to learn Swedish for free if you have a personal number. You usually need the personal number before you can sign up, but then you can sign up right away. However, I would definitely encourage taking advantage of whatever your university offers, because learning Swedish is a great way to meet people, to get involved in society, to make friends. And if you want to work in Sweden in the future, it will be invaluable to you.
Yeah, I can say just from personal experience, because we both had to learn Swedish, and English is our first language, both Rachel and I. And you can get around here in English, of course, no problem. Everyone speaks English, and all Swedes speak English very, very well. So that's probably a good question to answer that no one's asked, is English. You'll have no problems here at all. If you really kind of want to get into the culture here and really want to be able, exactly as Rachel said, to be able to work, it can be good to learn some Swedish. I made myself learn Swedish and told everyone to stop speaking English with me so that I could, I don't know, just have coffee with people and be able to chat a little bit in Swedish. So, but it's up to you. If your coursework is very busy, probably not a good idea to put too much time into learning Swedish.
Perfect. So we have one more question, which I will answer. Noor has asked, what do I do when I arrive? What are my first steps? How do I get started? So first of all, I want to say that you will be contacted by Chalmers, definitely in the case of Chalmers, and they will help you to get started. They have student ambassadors. I'm sure your program coordinator will be in touch with you, and they will certainly have an orientation program once you arrive to get started. But in general, for everyone watching from different universities and who's just wondering in general, how do I get started? We have a guide on our website, which I will share with you now. So this screen that I'm showing you right now is universityadmissions.se, which is where you can apply for programs. But if you go to studyinsweden.se, which is our official website, we have a guide called 8 Ways to Prepare for Your Studies in Sweden. And I would recommend reading through it if you are coming, because it really breaks down your next steps so that you don't feel overwhelmed. So your first step is accepting your offer, which hopefully you've all done. And if you haven't done yet, you will do soon. Your next step is to pay your tuition fee installment, your first installment. Step 3 is to apply for your visa and residence permit. And we have links here for how to do so. Find housing, and here's a little bit of advice. It's always good to start as early as possible with searching for housing, because it can take a long time in some cities. Step 5 is arrange for practicalities, and you can think about things like health insurance, your personal financing, and just general practical advice. It's good to read about things like internet, a cell phone, getting a bike, look at a map of your city, just all that kind of fun practical stuff. That's good to get an idea of. Step 6 is connect with your future classmates. Somebody else had asked us about this. And I think it's really, really useful to start using social networking sites to get to know your future classmates. Of course, you could also start an email group if you're able to get a mailing list from your department. It's possible that your university will already have started a group, or that some other person will have started a group, but otherwise, I really encourage you to start a group yourself, and people will definitely start joining. Step 7 is to read about Swedish culture in your new city. It's a really great way to start feeling like you're really coming to Sweden, to start reading about news. There's a website called The Local, which is thelocal.se, which has all the news from Sweden in English. You can follow the Digital Ambassadors blog on our website, which I'll show you in a second, which is a great way to start getting in the Sweden swing of things. Sweden.se, which is a website that our agency runs, has a lot of great background information about Sweden, which can also be helpful if your family are wondering, where is Sweden? Is that even a country? Where is it on a map? You can tell them all about Sweden through that site. There are a lot of online courses, sort of basic intros to Swedish, that can be a fun way to start learning how to say hej and tack and some fika,
Fika, of course.
the key Swedish words, and you'll be laughing at that joke once you get here. And of course, a lot of local Swedish embassies and consulates have cultural events and programs and exhibits that are really fun to visit. I also welcome you all to follow us on social media, and of course, your university. Study in Sweden has a Facebook page where you can download these really fun cover photos for your own Facebook page if you are interested in.
Oh yeah, I saw those. Those are so neat.
Yeah, I think so too. They're fun. You can share your Study in Sweden pride with your friends, and we'll update you about what's the latest in Sweden. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow our bloggers on Instagram, and then you can also follow the student blog. And if you go into about our bloggers, you can read about where each blogger is from and where they're studying. They're all really happy to hear from you if you have questions about studying at that university, or if you're from that country and want to know, what it's like to be a Bangladeshi student studying in Sweden and so on, or just in general, even if you're not studying at the same university as anyone or from the same country as anyone, they're really happy to hear from you. Some of them have email addresses posted. Otherwise, you can just comment on their posts and they'll answer you. So with that, we can wrap up today. I can also mention that if any of you guys are in India, I would imagine that not too many of you are in China, but if you're in India, China, or South Korea, we will be holding events for accepted students over the next couple of weeks. And you can find more details about those at our website, studyinsweden.se. So remember, if you're a bachelor student, to apply by accept your offer by April 2nd. A bachelor student, or master student, I'm getting tongue-tied. Master students, accept your offer by April 13th. And we have one final question when our next hangout is. We have a schedule of our hangouts on studyinsweden.se, and we're going to be having a couple throughout the rest of the spring in April, May, and June with our fellow digital ambassadors. So I'll actually let you know the dates in case you're curious. Our next hangout will be on April 22nd, and we'll be joined at that hangout by Jesus and Marta, who are digital ambassadors and speak about 8,000 languages, including English, French, German, Italian, Luxembourgish, Polish, Russian, Spanish, and Ukrainian, in addition to Swedish.
That's insane.
So if you have a question in any of those languages, which is almost hard not to,
wow,
I would recommend joining us then. If you have a question about preparing for this fall, or have a question in Arabic, we will be having a hangout with our blogger Mohammed on May 12th. And we will be having a hangout with our ambassador Raghu Raman from India on June 3rd, and he will answer questions in English, Hindi, and Tamil. So we hope to see you all there, and we hope that this hangout was helpful for you. If you have more questions, again, you can reach us on all the social media we've been through. You can also email us through our website, studyinsweden.se. You can contact University Admissions through their website. Directly on the homepage, universityadmissions.se, you'll find their phone number and all their contact details. And of course, you can contact our bloggers through the blog if you have questions for them. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Marlene, would you like to add anything before we sign off?
I just wanted to say that, we were a little bit unsure about our IT knowledge of how these Google Hangouts work, and I think this has been fantastic. So I hope we can definitely do this more. It's really nice to be able to talk with answers. There's so much text and so many things to read, and it's so nice when you have two actual people who are sitting and talking, and we love to answer your questions. So it's going to be great to do this more often. I'm so glad you asked me to come.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Marlene, and thank you all for joining us today, and wish you a great week, and welcome to Sweden this fall.
Bye,
Bye everyone.